Hi again, everyone, and to everyone who's just joined us. We'll be starting in about 5 minutes. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Limmud Live with the South African Jewish Report. And welcome to this really interesting session that we're going to be hosting with our presenters, Thembekile Molaudzi and Carolyn Raphaely. We welcome you all to engage in our sessions with the Limmud values in mind, in particular, the Limmud values of respect and arguments for the sake of heaven. We're also here to build connections, which is another Limmud value. So what we would suggest is that please, if you've got questions or comments for either of the presenters during the session, please post them in the chat box. And then at the end of their session, we'll pose some of those questions to you. We would also invite you, as some of you have been doing, to connect with one another in the chat box. We've got some ideas of where people are coming from and joining us from tonight. But just generally, if you see someone that you know, a name that you want to connect with, feel free to do so in the chat box. That's very much in line with our Limmud values. So while we're just before we prepare to actually start the session, just a few things to note. One thing is, please note that the session is being recorded. That's both for security purposes, but also so that we can be able to share this really interesting and important content with other people who weren't able to be here or who might be in one of the other sessions now. And then something that we would ask that makes things again, much more in line with the Limmud values and the atmosphere that we try to create at Limmud, is if you can and you haven't yet, please put your Zoom video on so that we can all see each other. Just to give you an understanding of how the session's going to work, is that we're going to be speaking to Thembekile and to Carolyn for about half an hour to 35 minutes, and then we'll have some time for your questions. So please, as things are being discussed, please, if you've got questions or comments, please again post them into the chat box. So again, just a reminder, because I see some people asking, this is room 2, and our 2 presenters this evening are Thembekile Molaudzi and Carolyn Raphaely. Just to give a short background to who they are, Thembekile was convicted and sentenced to life imprisonment in 2004 for the murder of a policeman, a crime which he always swore he did not commit. Prior to this conviction, he worked as a Soshanguve taxi driver. Thembekile, we so appreciate you sharing your heart-rending story as you did at Limmud in 2018. And we're grateful that you've agreed to again join us, this time online, to share your story with this audience. Now, Carolyn is a former Wits Justice Project award-winning journalist. She spent 9 years investigating human rights abuses and miscarriages of justice related to the South African criminal justice system. Carolyn, thanks so much for agreeing to join us tonight as a presenter. We know that you're a loyal Limmud delegate. Thanks again to Carolyn and Thembekile for being willing to use this Limmud South African Jewish Report event as a Zoom debut for their story. So I'm now going to hand over to them. And again, just a reminder, as they're speaking, please can you post questions in the chat box, which we'll then pose to them afterwards. Thembekile and Carolyn, it's over to both of you now. Carolyn, just a reminder before you talk to unmute yourself. Carolyn, I'm not sure if you can hear us. If you're talking, you're just on mute. So a reminder to please unmute yourself. We're just, unfortunately, as sometimes happens with online events, we're just trying to sort something out here. If you'll give us 2 seconds so that we can allow Carolyn and Thembekile to properly present their really interesting story. There you go, Carolyn. Thanks for joining us.
1 minute, please. Sorry, I'm having a problem.
No, we can hear you, so you're all sorted.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes,
Hello?
I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Occasionally in life, you meet someone who shifts your perspective and changes your worldview immeasurably. I never expected to find that person behind the bars of Sonderwater prison. Yet Thembekile, a convicted murderer, has taught me some of my greatest life lessons about patience, perseverance, resilience, courage, and forgiveness. He's a remarkable man with whom I've been privileged to travel a long road from a South African prison cell to America and back. Our journey began about 5 years ago when I received a call from Sonderwater prison warder Levi Mpakani, who told me that in the 18 years he'd worked as a warder, nearly every prisoner he'd engaged with said, "I didn't do it," and claimed to be wrongfully convicted. But Levi said, Thembekile, sentenced to life imprisonment for the murder of a policeman, was the first inmate whose story he'd ever believed. In my work as a Wits Justice Project journalist, I'd also heard many I didn't do it stories. But since Levi was the first prison warder to call me, I sat up and took note. While Thembekile was protesting his innocence, telling anyone who'd listen that he'd never committed any crime and that a crime had been committed against him, Levi conducted his own informal investigation. He scoured Thembekile's prison files and talked to his family, friends, and co-accused, who all told him Thembekile had been wrongfully convicted. I initially agreed to go to Sonderwater to meet Thembekile, not because Levi said he was innocent, but because he also said Thembekile had tried unsuccessfully for more than 8 years to obtain his trial transcripts, which he needed to appeal his case. It's a constitutional right. In addition, the Wits Justice Project had received numerous complaints about missing transcripts, and we regarded this as an issue with serious human rights implications. I'm very trusting by nature and apparently a bit naive, according to my husband, and not always the best judge of character. I have to admit, I took an immediate liking to Thembekile at our first meeting, and I agreed to help him find his transcripts. Intuitively, I agreed with Levi, and I had to remind myself repeatedly over the ensuing years that being Mr. Nice Guy doesn't mean you're not a murderer, and also that my gut would never provide exculpatory evidence. Prison is a parallel universe where absolutely nothing can be taken for granted. There's always a possibility you're being played and that the person you're dealing with is a charming sociopath. So I also needed the transcripts to decide whether to stay on Thembekile's case. Luckily for both of us, Thembekile's monumental struggle to prove his innocence against seemingly insurmountable odds, including torture, solitary confinement, and his prolonged transcript search, finally came to an end 3 years later. After spending 11 years behind bars for a crime he always swore he did not commit, the Constitutional Court overturned his conviction and sentence and ordered his immediate release in 2015. Thembekile's nightmare began in 2002, when a Mototloong policeman was murdered during a botched hijacking. 8 men were rounded up and arrested, including Thembekile and 4 unknown others. During 2 ID parades, the policeman's daughter, the only witness to her father's murder, fingered 4 suspects. Thembekile, an easily identifiable 2-meter giant of a man, was not one of them. During a bungled police investigation characterized by shoddy detective work, no weapon or gun residue was found. There were no other witnesses, no independent corroboration, no fingerprints, and no tangible evidence linking him to the crime. All of the accused pleaded not guilty, but all were convicted and sentenced to life by Justice Monica Liu, now Northwest Judge President. The only evidence implicating Thembekile was a recanted confession by a co-accused who changed his testimony 4 times and whom a full bench of the Northwest High Court subsequently described as a reckless liar. Central to his testimony was an astonishing claim about the alleged getaway car, a Toyota Cressida, in which the men supposedly traveled for about 90 minutes to the crime scene and back. How 8 grown men, including 3 unusually tall men, could have fitted into a Cressida still baffles me. Immediately after the men's 2004 conviction and sentence, they were admitted to Pretoria CMAX, where they were forced to strip naked and tortured by warders for no apparent reason. They were forced to squat up and down in front of women warders with their genitals exposed, shocked with shock shields and beaten. Later that year, when Thembekile was transferred to Kokstad's Mbongweni prison, designed to house South Africa's most dangerous criminals, he was tortured again and placed in segregated or solitary confinement for 4 years. When he began searching for his transcripts to appeal his case, the process proved almost as torturous. Though indigent inmates are legally entitled to their records at state expense, after a 3-year wait, Thembekile's family, with the families of 2 of his co-accused, managed to raise 18,000 Rand between them to pay private attorneys to find the transcripts. Another 2 years passed before these materialized, with more than half of the 1,023-page record missing, including the most crucial evidence. Thembekile began bombarding anyone and everyone he could think of with requests for help. He even wrote to the Judicial Conduct Committee accusing Judge Liu of unethical misconduct. When he discovered his docket had also disappeared from Mototlong police station, he complained to the Minister of Police. The docket mysteriously rematerialized, but the police refused to release it. So, with only grade 10 education under his belt, Thembekile spent his days studying the Constitution, the Criminal Procedure Act, and advising other inmates of their rights. Not even the prison psychologist believed his story. So, armed with only prayers, faith, and the courage of his convictions, he soldiered on, bolstered by an overwhelming need to prove his innocence and be reunited with his wife, Paulina, and young son, Mark, who was just 3 months when he was arrested. Witnessing Thembekile's distress, Levi decided to take matters into his own hands and contacted me. I'm a journalist, not a lawyer. I had no idea what a mandamus application was or a notice of motion, let alone what an appeal to the Concourt or the Supreme Court entailed. It was Thembekile's job to educate me, and he patiently explained and re-explained the most intricate of legal technicalities. When I finally understood his point, he'd say, at last, now you're thinking like a lawyer. I think we made a good team. Under his guidance, I obediently set off in search of his holy grail. About 3 months later, just when I thought I'd hit a brick wall, I had an unexpected breakthrough in my local Woolies garage shop late one night. When I recognized a prominent legal personality whom I didn't know buying milk, I hesitated for a nanosecond before pouncing on him and asking his advice. A bit of chutzpah never harmed anyone. As a result, I contacted Lawyers for Human Rights the very next morning, and after shameless name dropping, persuaded the director Jacob van Garderen to intervene. Thembekile received his transcripts in record time, but yet again, huge chunks of crucial evidence were missing. Finally, under pressure from Lawyers for Human Rights, Justice Liu ordered his trial records to be retranscribed. Judge Liu, I later learned, was a former Lawyers for Human Rights board member. 3 weeks later, Thembekile was finally in a position to appeal his case, a basic right which had required a David and Goliath battle to attain. However, when this battle ended, another one began. At the end of 2012, Thembekile shuffled into the Northwest High Court to appeal his case with his legs in manacles and chained like a dog. He was pretty optimistic about the outcome, but his appeal was dismissed by a full bench. Excuse me. A subsequent Supreme Court appeal was also dismissed, with no reasons given. When legal aid said they couldn't assist him any further, he simply roped in an ex-prosecutor fellow inmate to help him lodge a Concourt appeal. This appeal was also dismissed. The court said no constitutional issues were raised and the case had no reasonable prospects of success. I remember thinking, whatever, I'm done. All these courts, including the highest court in the land, can't be wrong. I couldn't believe it was possible for the system to have failed Thembekile so badly, and I questioned him and my own judgment. There were many occasions when he phoned me from prison, and I had no idea how to comfort him, what to say, or if I even still believed him. It was also difficult to defend the rights of a man sentenced to life imprisonment for murder in a climate of fear fueled by South Africa's high crime rates. A home invasion in which my husband was held up at gunpoint by 4 armed men didn't help either. From the get-go, I worried about the fact that Thembekile had no alibi. I asked him repeatedly where he was on the night of the policeman's murder, and his answer was always, I don't know, I think I was at home with my granny. And I was like, how can you not know where you were? Why can't you figure it out? Sadly, his granny, who might have been an alibi witness, passed away during the trial just before he testified. My aha moment came when I heard Deirdre Enright, who heads the University of Virginia's Innocence Project, explain that the lack of an alibi might actually be a good thing, particularly in the case of someone who hasn't committed a crime. Who, she explained, remembers where they were a month or 3 ago, and Thembekile, a Pretoria taxi driver who was arrested 6 months after the policeman's murder, never kept a diary. Legally, the Con Court was Thembekile's last port of call, but even after the court dismissed his case, he never gave up hope. Instead, he spent a lot of time on his knees. Eventually, his prayers were answered as a result of serendipity, fate, or divine intervention, when 2 of his co-accused, Boswell Mhlongo and Disco Nkosi, lodged their own Con Court appeal. Having learned from Thembekile's experience, their appeal was based on a constitutional principle. Since Boswell and Disco also had no legal assistance, apart from a UNISA law student behind bars, the court appointed an advocate to represent them on a pro bono basis. Nigel Carpenter, a state prosecutor committed to the pursuit of justice, proved an added bonus. Carpenter told the court that the only evidence implicating Boswell and Disco were extracurrial, out-of-court statements by a co-accused which were inadmissible and unconstitutional. When he announced that an unnamed accused number 5 had been similarly convicted, Thembekile's life changed course in a heartbeat. 2 weeks later, the court overturned Boswell and Disco's convictions and ordered their immediate release. Unfortunately, this didn't mean an immediate jail-free pass for Thembekile. When it emerged that he was accused number 5, he found himself unwittingly mired in complicated legal arguments regarding the doctrine of res judicata, meaning in common parlance, you can only have one bite of the legal cherry. Since the court had already heard and dismissed Thembekile's application 2 years earlier, it then needed to resolve whether it had the jurisdiction to hear the matter again. It took a further 3 months before the highest court in our land decided that in the interests of justice, it would reverse its own ruling for the first time ever. Meantime, for 3 long years, Thembekile had cautioned me against writing his story, and I respected his wishes against my better judgment. When I visited him in prison a few weeks before his release, champing at the bit and furious about the injustice of his situation, he told me to calm down and be patient. God is never late, he said. When he eventually walked out of the prison gates with 11 lost years behind him and an uncertain future before him, he promised 2 of his other co-accused, Sampi and Victor Moyo, that he'd also help them prove their innocence. He kept his word and roped me in to help, but that's another long story. The end result was in March 2017, the Con Court also overturned Sampi and Victor's convictions. So Thembekile's matter became a case of 1 murder, 1 judge, 5 wrongfully convicted men, and no compensation from the state. Though Judge Liu shoulders no consequence for the shattered dreams and lost years stolen from the 5 men she sentenced to life imprisonment, Thembekile harbors no bitterness towards her. In fact, he's told me many times with enormous magnanimity, to err is human. That is the measure of the man and his extraordinary capacity for forgiveness. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolyn. I'm just standing in for Ariella, who's been locked out of the room. I think we can ask Thembekile now to join you and share his story. Thembekile, I think you are you muted? We can't hear you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Thembekile. Yes, I am. Can you hear me now?
Right, we can hear you. You can carry on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go for it.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you quite well.
So, okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Thembekile. Yes, thank you.
It's not you're not in a great position, Thembekile. Thembekile, you're in an area with poor reception. Is it possible to go somewhere where it's better?
My name is Thembekile Molaudzi. I can say everything I want to in misery I've been through. Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Me now?
Yes.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Thembekile, perhaps if you turn off your video, we might be able to hear you better without it. I think we've lost you. Are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, now we can see you and hear you. That's much better. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can I start again?
Right, thank you. Would you mind?
All right. So my name is Thembekile Molaudzi. I'm from Pretoria, Garankuwa. Before I can say everything, I want to thank the Lord for keeping me so strong from all the misery I've been through. In 2003, 18 February, I was arrested for the crime I didn't commit, and then I was introduced to some co-accused unknown to me, and then when time goes on, I requested the bail, and then before I could granted bail, I was told to go to an ID parade, and then during the ID parade, I was not pointed, only 2 accused were appointed, and then the matter goes on until around March, and then in March, I was granted bail. All the proceedings, I was attending them while I was on bail. So during the proceedings, everything was manipulated, and then it was just a bungling investigation, and then the police manipulated the proceeding together with the prosecutors. There was no evidence linking me. There was nothing tangible linking me. There was no gun residue or any ammunition or any firearm that was linking me. I was not pointed out during the ID parade, and there was no witness that has that could witness against me. There was no one who can talk about me or link me to the crime. So I was only there for the crime I did not commit, and then I was only included in the confession statement of the one accused who was unknown to me. And the same co-accused, he counted his statement before the court many times, that through 2003, 2004, until the presiding officer found that all of us guilty. We were 8, and then he found us all guilty and sentenced us to life imprisonment. On the 22nd of July 2004, we were sentenced to life imprisonment. We were taken to Odi prison, from Odi prison to CIMEX Correctional Center. When we arrived there, we were stripped out all our clothes and shocked with electric shock, and then we were forced to make these sit-ups. They were searching us, and then we were tortured, and we were taken to the solitary confinement. So during the first week of the sentence, I wrote letters to the president of the country. By then it was President Thabo Mbeki. Then I was requesting for help, just for assistance, so that I can get my freedom back. The only thing, I didn't want him to come and assist me. Only I just wanted his intervention, because of I was serving life sentence for the crime I did not commit. So I got a response that the office of the president has no jurisdiction between it and the judiciary, and then it has no powers. The only thing I can do was to write an appeal. So I requested legal aid to assist me with my appeal, and then the legal aid told me that they were in financial constraint, and then I have to get the record. My family, the legal aid could not assist me with the records, and then I was told that the record they could not assist me with the record because they were in financial constraint, and then my family has to contribute the money so that the record could be purchased. So the money was purchased, and then by that time it was 2005. Then we were transferred to Kokstad, Ebongweni. When we arrived in Ebongweni, we were tortured again and forced to strip out our uniform, and then we were tortured with electric shock. And then I wrote to the office of the president again, the office of the Minister of Justice, the office of Human Rights Commission, the office of Public Protector. All the respondents I got was only reluctant correspondences. They were reluctant to assist me. In 2006, around 2008, we were sent back to CIMEX, and then we were tortured again. All this correctional institution, while I was transferred to, I've been writing letters to different government institutions requesting for help. When I was sentenced, I left my son. He was almost a year old, and then when they come to visit me, I could not touch him because of he would see me through a glass, and then one of my hand was carved to the stone that they made it as a chair, and then I was only using one hand, and then I would only touch the glass, and then you would touch the glass, and then it was so torturing for me. And then I had to request to the social worker to request for personal consultation, and then my request was approved. And then the first time I touched my son, it was a very, very, very terrific moment for me, because of all the years I've been missing him, never seen him. I was not there when he was on the first day to go to school. I was not there when he crawled. I was not there when he started to walk. So the years behind bars, when you are incarcerated, is very terrible, because of you speaking to people, and then they don't believe you. They cannot understand how come the presiding officer can found you guilty without evidence. So in 2012, I requested a prison warder to assist me because I showed him some evidence that I've been writing to different government institutions requesting for help, and then they are reluctant to help me. The prison warder called the Vest Justice Project, and the Vest Justice Project, he founded Miss Carolyn, Raphaely, and then she came in, consulted me. Then I showed her the evidence, the correspondences, and then she requested the human rights lawyers for assistance. And then suddenly my record was found. And before that record was found, the one that we purchased, the record was incomplete. And then I could not appeal with it because of the record was not authentic. And then there was no way that I can prove my innocence before the appeal court that I was convicted for the crime I did not commit. It was terrible and horrific because of day and night I would cry thinking, which remedy must I use just to get my freedom back? Rain was not allowed to rain on my body. I could not see the sky. I could not see the sun. I could not be with my family. I was crying all the time, and then I was depressed until I could not understand what was happening with my life. Sometimes while I was incarcerated, I would bedwet, and then I could not feel when did I wet the blankets. But when I wake up, I will find out my bed is wet, and then I did not know when did I pee. And that thing has tortured me. All the inhuman, the degrading that happens to me, I could not do to anyone. So in 2012, when I went to the Mafikeng High Court, I was granted to leave to appeal, and then the full bench dismissed my appeal. The Supreme Court dismissed my appeal. The Constitutional Court dismissed my appeal. I was only released in 2015. All the inhumane, the treatment, it has been tortured, the torturing, it has been tattooed on my brain. All the time, I cannot stop thinking of it. Now and then, I'm still thinking of it. My son was raised without a father figure. When I would call him, he will ask me, when am I coming back? And then I will say, soon I will be back. Each and every year, I would promise him I'm coming soon. He end up saying, no, Daddy, you always lie to me. I don't trust you anymore. I don't have hope that you are coming. You are lying to me. So I kept my faith on. I kept on nagging God. I kept on praying, and I was competent in praying. And then I keep on consistently praying that one day God will answer my prayers. So it happens that in 2015, when my co-accused was out, my matter was re-enrolled again, reheard in the Constitutional Court, and then I got my freedom in 2015 on the 26th of June. So my first day to see the sky, it was the 26th of June, and then I was a very happy man on the whole planet of Earth. I was happy. In 2018, I was very fortunate that I fly to New York and then went to Memphis to meet some other exonerees that were supposed to be executed. When watching them, I find myself as a very fortunate person because of they were supposed to be executed. I was serving life sentence. I was not promised to be executed. They were supposed to be executed and they were exonerated. So I look at myself and say, I was very fortunate. They were supposed to be executed, but with the grace of God, I survived. They survived too. So going to America was a blessing and a lesson for me because there were higher cases than mine. And then I have found that everything that happened in my life was a very touching and horrific. I don't have words to can express what I can say. It's very disturbing because of even now, when I see a prison warder wearing a brown clothes, I just imagine of incarceration. And
Hi, Thembekile. Unfortunately, it seems that we've had a problem with your internet connection, and we apologize firstly to you and also to everyone else who's joining us tonight. I don't know if you can maybe try connect again, and maybe in the meantime, just to assist us in processing what we've just heard from Thembekile. If Carolyn's there, if we can ask a couple of questions, maybe once Thembekile is back, we can direct some questions to him. But Carolyn, if we can ask you a question, what is your, we said in the introduction that you've spent 9 years working with human rights and the South African criminal justice system. And we're just wondering maybe if you can discuss what you think went wrong here with Thembekile. Where in his case, where in the system did it go wrong? Was it at the police? Was it at the magistrate side, or in the appeal system that just didn't allow him to appeal in time? And Carolyn, if while you're considering that, I also just want to flag that you're apparently starting to write a book on the journey that you've gone through in meeting Thembekile and finding out his story, and then of course the journey that he went through in getting released from jail and having himself exonerated.
I think that this case is indicative of systemic problems in the criminal justice system, which is increasingly dysfunctional. And if you're poor, Black, and uneducated, it becomes even more dysfunctional. But in South Africa, we have no idea of the magnitude of the wrongful conviction problem, because the National Prosecuting Authority nor the Department of Correctional Services keep records. So there are no numbers, but in America, there is an organization called the National Registry of Exonerations, and Thembekile's case has all the hallmarks and all the characteristics of what the National Registry of Exonerations in America has discovered are characteristic of wrongful conviction cases, and those, the leading